Hi guys, it's Melinda. I took a few days off. I needed a minute. Um, but I'm back. I'm going to pray and quickly get into it. There's several things I realize I skipped from the last video. I'll quickly go back and visit them and then move on. We're coming up to some territory that's actually has a lot of scars for me. You're going to find out like what a hypocrite I am, and you're going to find out what it's like to wrestle with forgiveness, and especially forgiving yourself, which I still struggle with, and I have a lot of self-hate and shame that I carry. Even though I know it's under the blood of Jesus and I'm forgiven, I still carry the weight of the consequences of my choices. And again, I'm going to try to be as delicate as I can. But I want you guys to understand that I would love to like paint a perfect picture and say A happened, then B happened, and then C happened, and then D happened, and it was lovely and perfect. And because I used to be like that. Well, it's not. It's messy and hard and confusing. It's worth it, but the journey is not easy. And so I'm going to pray, because I really don't want to sit all day and try to edit out things that I'm saying that I shouldn't say or whatever. And I don't want to dishonor and disrespect anybody. But I also want to be authentic to the story because I wanted to help you. And if I'm in truth, there's freedom. There's freedom in truth. And if I pretty up the picture or deny things, then I'm taking away the power of the testimony, and I won't do that. So I'm going to go ahead and pray. I'm going to revisit some stuff I forgot, and then we'll move on, okay? Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for this day. Lord, you know I've prayed. I'm doing this for obedience to you. I'm doing it in hopes to help somebody out there who might be struggling with some of the things I did and struggling with self-hate and resentment toward themselves or other people who might have hurt them. And I want to see freedom, Lord. And there's freedom in truth, Father. Satan loses his power if we bring everything to the light. Because you're in the light, Lord, and you redeem the story when it's brought to the light. So, Father, that's what I'm trying to do. Bring all of this to the light so that those who might have dark corners in their hearts, Father, will have the courage and faith to bring it to the light, to bring it to Jesus Christ so that they can find freedom. But there's still wrestling between the flesh and the heart, Lord, the flesh and the mind, the flesh and the soul. Lord, my spirit wants to do what's right, but my flesh doesn't always obey. And we're going to find that out, Lord. So help me to say what needs to be said. Help the listeners to understand the depth of the story. Even though I jump very quickly from things, it doesn't mean that the agony of the battle wasn't as real as them watching these videos. The hurt and the pain, and the battle within was difficult, Lord. So we commit this to you. I pray for your anointing. I pray for your blessing. I pray for your grace. I pray for your intervention, both for me and for every listener who's listening. Thank you, Father, that there's freedom in Christ, that when he died for all, and he died for our freedom. And when we receive that gift of forgiveness, Lord, we're free indeed. Thank you, Jesus, for loving us. It's in your name I pray. Amen. Okay. I actually wrote some stuff down because there were so many nuances that I had skipped through. A peculiar thing, because I had talked to you guys about the semi. When we had met that guy who had gotten my ex-husband into semi-driving, his wife and daughter, actually, I believe his daughter was there too, were with them. So there were several of us in the vehicle when he drove me back to Flagstaff to meet my brother. Also something I completely gleaned over in the semi, the adventures of the semi. I think this is probably one of the reasons I grew weary of being in it. yeah, I can't believe, like, we were driving, I think we had just started out, when we had gone back east, we were driving through Oklahoma or something, and there was a snowstorm. And it wasn't just a snowstorm, it was like an ice storm. So the only people who were out were the semi drivers. And I remember my boyfriend at the time, ex-husband, on there, and everybody was talking to their dispatcher. And all the trucks were talking to each other. And finally, this truck that was in front of us said, you know, if I, he called his dispatch douchebag. Don't be mad at me, that's what he called him. But he said, you know, he's like, I need to call him and say, you know, I'm not going to make it. And I know he's going to say if we're going to be late, but if I'm dead, I'm not going to make it anyway. Because it was really bad, you guys. I mean, a serious snowstorm. So we're driving, and I remember people, because my boyfriend at the time knew his truck and knew how much he had to accelerate to go up over a hill or whatever, and people were saying stuff to him like he was driving too fast or whatever, but he like knew his truck and what have you. And but at one point we're following, it's almost like a convoy, but it isn't, it's just semi drivers out. We were driving down the freeway, and when we get to go toward there's an overpass, a roadway truck, a double trailer roadway truck had jackknifed and turned sideways where you couldn't get over the bridge. So that meant everybody who had gone up had to back down to get around this truck. They had to take the exit that happened to be on that overpass. Well, everybody's like backing down. There's like semi trucks all backing down off of this thing, off of this overpass, and then they go off into like the exit and try to sort of figure out how to get there. And it's like the middle of the night. It's like, I don't know, like 3 o'clock in the morning or something. And there's semi drivers, and we were like in a farm community. You could tell we were out in the middle of nowhere, but we are driving past houses. Can you imagine what they were thinking when they're waking up and seeing this convoys of trucks driving in this snowstorm, because they had to get to a place where we could stop, which was a truck stop. Eventually we would make it to a truck stop and stop. But that's the kind of stuff that made me like, because I am so anxious in snowstorms. Just ask my family. My present husband is a really skilled driver, because his job has called him to have to drive in the snow too. And like, I trust him, but I don't like to drive in it myself. I just really don't. So I just, in between that, and if you remember, I said the snowstorm that we went in when we went to Detroit with my brother and sister, and they were high and stuff like that. So I'm really like, when it comes to that. But another thing, a weird thing that happened, I realized I have a lot of anxiety with vehicles. Another thing that happened with the vehicles, we lived in 3 different apartments. The one where my kids were born, the ones where my daughter choked, and the ones where I OD. So if you remember, there was 3 apartments in Arizona. In each apartment, I got rear-ended when we lived in each apartment. The first one, I didn't have my girls with me. I was in the left-hand turning lane going to see my mom. This car comes up, and instead of going through the light, slams into the back of me. Actually hooks my bumper to his car. I get out, walk back. He cracks the window about this much. He's scared, it's obvious. He asked me if I'm okay. I said, yeah, but my car hit a truck in front of me and pushed it out into, the intersection. So I had to go check on him. As I walked up to check on him, the guy backs up and takes off through the intersection, ripping off my license plate and pulling out the bumper a few inches. The second time I'm on the freeway at rush hour, I have my twins with me this time. A car, and I can see in the rearview mirror he's not going to stop, so I sort of lock my arms knowing he's not going to stop. He slams into me about 30 or 40 miles an hour, pushes me forward, and I remember at this point, like, it had been the second time that I had gotten hit, and at this point I knew I had whiplash because I could feel the pain in my neck. And my girls are crying, and the guy comes up, and I sort of do the same thing the other guy does. I'm not leaving the vehicle because my children are in it. I roll down the window. He's like, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I think so, but my kids are crying. They're in the car. I need to make sure my kids are okay. Well, with that, he walks back to his car, backs up, and takes off. And so it happened a second time. The third time, we were at the other apartment, and our neighbor, who I said had the dog named Rhoda, who liked to drink, she had a little, I think it was a Datsun. Hey guys, it's a Datsun 280Z. I said Z28. That's my puppy wanting out. So, all right, back to the story. We're in it and we're at a stoplight, and sure enough, a guy comes up and slam hits us in the back, and again with the whiplash. But we were fine. It was just, and he didn't take off or anything. I think it was fine and stuff like that. But now, if you see me in a vehicle, I am really paranoid about being rear-ended. I'm always, and I learned this from being in the semi, I guess, too, constantly watching my mirrors. Constantly. When I'm actually a pretty good backer-upper because I know how to use my mirrors really well, because I constantly use my mirrors. And with a semi, you had to learn to use your mirrors. You had to back up using mirrors. And so that's how I back up. I actually use mirrors. But I'm like a parent. I drive people nuts. I know. I have a lot of, I told you guys, there's a lot of, even though I feel like I'm free, there's a lot of residuals in my life of habits or things that I do because of my past. And I think we all have that. And if you probably reflected on your past, you would be able to see, I do that because of this, or I do that because of this. And like one of the things too that I remember, and I had forgotten about this. Remember I told you that last apartment we lived in that there was, I think maybe this might have also helped spawn us to like get out of Dodge with Arizona is we had that upstairs neighbor, that girl that I'd become really good friends with. Well, she didn't only get addicted to crystal meth, she started dealing. Well, there was somebody in the complex where she did a deal with or something, and something went wrong. Well, one day I'd pulled into the complex or something, and I saw the guy who had ripped her off or whatever, and I say something like, I don't know, under my breath, I'm like, there's the, a-hole that ripped her off or whatever. I say something like that. Well, they end up getting in a fight. Like, she's at the top of the stairs and he's at the bottom, and they're fighting. And I walk by, and when I walk by, he's like, you, to me, and he calls me a bitch. Well, I go inside and I tell my boyfriend at the time what he did. Well, he doesn't tolerate it. He comes out, and he came out, and my boyfriend at the time said, he called me his wife at that time, don't call me my wife, don't call my wife a B. And he's like, I'm warning you, don't do it again. He stepped forward and he's like, I just did. And with that, my boyfriend, future husband, clocks a man on the ground, one punch on the ground. And he hit him 3 times. And I can remember hearing the sound of him hitting him. It was like 1, 2, 3. And I'm screaming, like, telling him to stop. And I said, stop, his name, stop. I said that with each punch. I'm like, stop, his name, my boyfriend's name, stop. And with that, he turns around, he's like, get in the house. And I like run in the house. And I'm telling my nephew to call 911 or call the police. And he starts to, and then it dawns on him, well, that's not a good idea because my boyfriend would have been the one to go to jail. So he doesn't. Well, once he had told me to get in the house, he got up and he walks in the house. Well, we're in the house, and I'm like thinking, oh my gosh, he killed him. And he only hit him 3 times. But I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he killed him. Well, the guy gets up and he's like staggering around, and I'm like, thankfully he's alive. Well, a little bit later, we get a knock on the door, and it's the guy that my boyfriend had hit, the guy that had called me a B, not once but twice, and then stepped forward and said, I just did, and got the crap beat out of him with 3 punches. And he's like, hey, I don't know what happened. Something happened. And he was like disoriented. And he goes, I can't remember what happened. Yet he came to our house, which was, I thought was odd. He's like, somebody beat me up. And my boyfriend at the time was like, yeah, I did. And he's like, you called my wife a bee, you stepped forward at me, and I hit you. And so my boyfriend at the time goes, takes him in the bathroom, cleans him up. He had broke his nose when he hit him. And cleaned him up and stuff and sent him on his merry way. Just, I mean, the guy who came to threaten us, he ends up taking him for a ride home. And this guy cleans up. Oh my gosh, you guys. Seriously, that's the kind of weird stuff that happened when you're like surrounded by, and people who say drugs don't hurt people, they're lying. They do. They hurt people. And during this time too, I forgot to tell you guys, at some point, and I don't know, looking back, and see, by the way, when I scratch my head, that's anxiety. The 2 times I came back to Illinois before this time when we come back to live, I had come back 2 times between there that I had forgot about. One was when I had gone to meet my boyfriend at the time when he was training for the semi. It was in Indiana, so we drove through to say hi to my sister. And I was pregnant, and we had gone to a store, and one of the people I used to work with saw me, and I was like 4 or 5 months pregnant then, and he had said something about, I guess you end up liking it after all, or something like that, because he had saw that I was pregnant. And basically I just laughed my head off and walked away. I don't know why, I just did. It was weird. But anyway, I also had come back. For some reason, my mom had decided to come visit. My kids were about 2.5. My mom had decided to come back and visit and see my grandma, who was living in her house at the time. And we had come back to see my brother, Norm. And my brother Paul had stayed in Arizona, but everybody else flew out here. And at that time, Pauline had left. I think they had left Illinois, so they weren't there because my girls were 2.5 by this time. And I think she even came back to Illinois or Arizona for a while. She did. And then she ended up leaving again. But we came up to visit, and we were staying at my grandma's, and I got to see some old friends and stuff, but it was just not the same. It was a weird kind of time. And my crystal meth use at that point was pretty bad, and so was my oldest sister's, and I was pretty thin, and it was just awkward and uncomfortable. And for some reason, this is so dumb, you guys, we didn't have any way home. Like, I don't know if I was under the assumption that it was a round trip ticket, but turns out that somehow or another, there was only 2 of us who could fly back. The rest of them had to drive, and it ended up being me with my kids and my nephew who flew back. But my brother Norm, being the hero, how he got the rest of the family back is he bought my sister her car, and they drove back. I don't know if this was planned. I don't really know. It was sort of an odd thing of how we ended up getting back to Illinois. You know what I mean? So, but those were the 2 times that I had come to visit. But what was weird is I remember, like, this is the first time that I could, like, really tell that my grandmother didn't like me, that visit. Because I remember my kids needing diapers, and I had to walk with my kids to the store to get diapers because she wouldn't drive me to the store. And I just remember that feeling, like, of that theme of feeling rejected by those I wanted to love me has been through most of my life. I have a people pleasing thing, and I have a addiction to leadership approval thing, because my whole life I have wanted those in authority to like me or love me or accept me or something, and I've just always strive for that, and it's actually been something that I've had to like battle through spiritually because and deal with, because it kept getting me into trouble and stuff. So yeah, just weird. Those are some of the things that I forgot to mention, but we have now moved back to Illinois, and again, my brother let us, my knight in shining armor had let us rent one of his houses, and it was a small house, but it was comfortable because I knew the house from when I was a kid, and it had huge trees in the yard, and these trees, when the leaves would fall, they'd be like 6 inches deep, and the entire yard. And when you would walk through it, that noise, I love the sound of crunching leaves. I love the smell of it. Fall is my favorite time of year. We would climb trees there, and I taught my kids how to ride a bike, because remember, there was now no more drugs. Like initially when we moved back, it was great. It was great. My now husband ended up getting 2 jobs, and I got a part-time job. I worked at the movie theater and then eventually worked at Kohl's. Again, with someone with an addictive personality, there was something that was going to replace, because I was, addicted to speed, addicted to crystal meth. I was anorexic, all the emotional things that created those situations in my life were still there. It's just I kept changing, phasing what I was addicted to. The thing about addicts is this: once I stopped doing the drugs and stopped being anorexic and, just stopped that kind of stuff, an addict who hasn't dealt with the reasons why they become an addict will just be addicted to something else. And I had a very addictive personality. Well, I ended up, from working at the movie theater, and then I started working at Kohl's, became addicted to shopping. I was constantly shopping. I bought my kids tons of clothes and stuff like that, and just tried showering them with things. And I don't know if I was motivated by guilt, or maybe it was a lack that I had when I was a kid, or maybe it was the fact that, seeing all the stuff that my brother had motivated me to want more than what we had. Because we lived very minimally. When we had lived in Arizona, my boyfriend at the time, we had bought this very expensive couch set, and we still had it, and it was a nice couch set. That was like the one thing we had, that was really super nice. And he had bought furniture before that, and so I remember getting a vacuum cleaner for the first time, or a microwave, and a VCR, and different things like that. So, but we were just pretty minimalist. But I remember at this time, like, I really tried to dress my kids to the nine and stuff. And throughout it, now at this point, by the time we moved back to Illinois, my kids now are 4. And like I said, I had regularly sent them to the doctor throughout the whole thing. And I had forgot to mention that first apartment they were born in, they actually got the measles. I don't know if it was a reaction from one of the shots or what, but like for 3 days straight, they screamed. It was awful. It was awful. I remember crying hysterically, like feeling like I was losing my mind. That's the first time like I had to lay the kids in the crib and walk away, because I felt like I could hurt somebody, because I just was so delirious from a lack of sleep. But like I said, I had regularly taken them to the doctor, and before we had left, we had found out that they had a heart condition, so we got a heart specialist, pretty quickly. And I remember when we had found out that they had a heart condition, I had come home when we were living back where his family was, and I remember his my boyfriend, soon-to-be husband, his brother sort of coming at me, asking me a million questions. And I remember I had used the word stop badgering me, and like it had caused a rift between us. And then when we moved shortly thereafter, that also might be why I started realizing that also might be why people weren't talking to me at my own wedding, because I had said, use the word badgering, because he was just like asking me that, and I was like, back off. And finally my future husband, boyfriend, had told his brother, like, back off, because I was trying to process the fact that my children both had a heart condition. Well, like I said, we had moved. Sorry, I backtracked, but we had moved, so we've moved here, living in one of my brother's rentals, and it was not bad. You know, like I said, my husband had gotten more than one job. I'd gotten a job, so I was working nights, and we just worked, and we spent time with our kids, and we played in the yard, and we went to apple orchard and the pumpkin patch, and we tried to do things that were fun. You know, we just tried to have a good time. I can hear my dog scratching, so I'll be right back. Sorry, back. But we just tried to be good parents. But I, all along through this whole time, I had set the fear into my children, because I started sharing. You know, I would overshare, because when I lived back where his family was, I had no friends for an entire year. Nobody. I had my kids. And so I used to talk to them a lot about things. They were, you know, we moved there. They were almost 3 when we moved there, and they were almost 4 when we left. And during that time, I just spent a lot of time talking to my kids. Way over talking, I think. Like I said, their dad and I weren't getting along and stuff like that. And I remember we were worried, you know, stressed about finances and stuff. And I remember one of my kids saying to me, you know, how are we going to pay the electric bill? Yeah, at 3 years old. Then I knew I was talking too much around them. And so when we had moved here, I had already set this fear in motion, because like I said, even when we lived in Arizona, I taught them that every stranger was bad, and that I didn't mean to do that. But I was like, you know, strangers, because I told you they stole kids and stuff like that. So I taught them to be afraid of anybody they didn't know, and even the people they did know. I said, if anybody ever hurts you or does anything to you, you tell somebody. And like, I drilled that in them. You tell, you know, tell a teacher, tell somebody. And I even included myself. I said, even if I ever do anything to hurt you, you tell somebody, go tell. So we were always really big on communicating. Like, we talked about everything. Huge, me and my kids were big on communicating. And I was over honest, and I think overshared. But again, I was young. So like I said, we had moved back to Illinois, and tried to make a go of it and stuff like that. But eventually, I started feeling that sense of rejection again, because my husband and I just didn't get along. We just didn't. He started making comments. He had started back when we lived with his family, because now that I wasn't doing drugs, I started gaining weight and became more of a normal size. And he would say stuff about me, about my weight, you know. And he even said stuff when I was skinny, you know, that I was flabby and needed to be toned, and that it wasn't attractive. And like, he always was making comments, and he became very verbally abusive. He could be so cruel in his comments, and not just to me, but even sometimes to his kids. And it would eventually get worse. Some of the stuff that he would say. But it just wasn't a healthy marriage, you know. And I had my friends come back into my life. I remember, like I said, I had a friend named Trina, and she had come back into my life. And the girl who had originally gone to Arizona, she had moved back up here, and she came back into my life. And then that girl that I said that was a huffer when I was a kid, I had ran into her. I only saw her once. And so I started having, you know, what was familiar come into my life, and sort of got distracted and drawn away through that. Not that they did that, because they didn't do that. Just me being so young, realizing like the heavy responsibility that I had on my shoulders, and not knowing how to process it because the person in me was broken. Well, one of my friends had a child, and she started suffering from depression, and this will come into play later. And she ended up taking Prozac. And the only reason I share that is because it's going to come into play into my life in a minute. So the first year we were here, that's kind of what we did. We just, you know, like, was the family the best way we could, working. And but again, there's a lot of strife in the marriage. And I remember, like, when I would at work, I would get attention from, like, there was some guy that worked at a different thing, and like, he would flirt with me and stuff like that. So I started getting attention, and I started liking it. And I remember I let this guy kiss me again. Now, mind you, I've only had the one affair, but this is the second person I've let kiss me, and now I'm married. Before I got married, I had an affair and let a different guy kiss me, and now I'm married and I let a guy kiss me. So that's not a good start to a marriage, because I was sad and lonely and depressed, and just was so unhappy because we were married out of obligation. Well, here's where things just go from bad to worse. It like, in such a way that it's like complete chaos for me. I remember it was one night I was sitting there, and I just felt like this longing to call my family. I was really missing my mom and my family, because, mind you, it's been an entire year, because I spent a year where my husband lived. So now I'm just really longing to see my family. Though I see my brother now, the rest of my family isn't around. So I called this night, and I'm talking to my sister Lorraine. Now, it's my mom, Lorraine, and Clyde live in this apartment. I think Lee may or may not have been there. My sister Judy was still down there, and she was still with my ex-brother-in-law, I think, at this time. Maybe not. Maybe they had split up at this point. I don't know. And then my nephew were all living there. So I called down there, and my little sister answers the phone, and I'm like trying to talk to her, and she's not being very nice to me, and which was pretty normal. And at this point, she had 2 kids. So my brother, I guess, walks into the house, and she's like, "Where have you been?" Because he was supposed to babysit. And for some reason, I said, "Don't talk to him like that." And she's like, "Look, I gotta go. Do you want to talk to Clyde or not?" And I hesitated, and I said, "No, it's late. Tell him I love him, and I'll talk to him later." Those were my exact words. And I hang up the phone, and I remember I just didn't feel right. Like, I just didn't feel right. And so that's about 10:30 our time. It's about 10:30 our time. About 1 o'clock our time, phone rings. And it's my mom. I believe it's my mom. Or my brother Norm. Somebody called. I can't actually remember now that I'm trying to tell you the story. I can't remember. I think it was my mom. My brother Clyde had been shot. And I lose it, sobbing hysterically. My friend who had gone down to Arizona, who was a better friend to me than I was to her, had come over, and she just stayed with me. And I remember I was hysterical, like hysterical, because we were finding out how he had died. My sister was hanging around some bad people, and he had left. My brother, apparently, after he had come home, he had left to go see his girlfriend or something and was coming back home. Well, meantime, she had left and went to some drug dealer's house. And when she had come back, she had walked into the house. Well, she was followed or something. And when she came into the house, my little brother had come walking up. Well, he had the same frame and sort of stance as this drug dealer, friend of hers or whatever, I don't know. And it was a case of mistaken identity, and they had come up, run up, and shot him in the head from behind. And so I already didn't get along with my little sister, so it wasn't going to take much for me to hate her. And I spent some time hating her, I'm not going to lie, like blaming her for his death. And this is where that forgiveness stuff is going to start to come to play, you guys, and it's not easy. But you're also going to see a lot of hypocrisy in me, because I literally come unraveled. I remember my friend being in the bathroom with me, and I'm just beating her legs, sobbing hysterically, like, why? And we had no money to get him up, because he had died in Arizona. We had no money to get him up to Illinois, because if you remember, my sister Joanne was buried in Illinois, and we wanted my brother to be brought up to be buried with her, because in that same cemetery was already my cousin who had died at 13, and my aunt who had died giving birth to my cousin. She wasn't aunt by marriage, was already buried in this cemetery. And so we had no way to get him up here. And so my mom called my grandfather, and he gave her money to buy him a casket and get him flown up here. Well, we still had to have money. We still had to have money for like a headstone and different things like that, which would come in, or for, not a head, we had to have, that will come in later, but we needed a burial plot. That's what I'm trying to say. We need a burial plot. Well, my friend took it upon herself and started calling the churches. And she was raised Lutheran, so she was calling the Lutheran churches. And one of the Lutheran churches donated a burial plot for my brother. And my friend, do you remember my friend Shirley, whose husband owned a headstone set place? They actually donated his headstone. It was, you know, the flat, had to be the flat kind. He actually made it. It was like the bronze and copper headstone set thing. Had donated that for us, for him. And they had donated the money for the vault, because you have to set the casket inside of a vault. And my grandfather had paid for him to come up here, get flown up here in the casket. And they had donated, my friend Shirley and Bill had donated the headstone. The church had donated the burial plot. And then my friend Bill and Shirley paid for the vault. Had donated money for the vault. And so, because at some point, and the car we had did not have insurance, you guys. I don't know. Neither did the other one we had in Arizona. So this was right around the time that insurance was becoming mandatory to not have insurance on it. And I get pulled over. And it's me and my friend and her kids, and like, it's a full car. And I remember when the cop pulled us over, I opened the door and he was like, "Do not get out of the vehicle." And like, I explained my plight, and I even showed him, like, because we had just gone to pay for the vault. And I showed him, you know, the receipt and stuff like that, and he let me go. And he's like, "Just don't drive this car anymore." And so I remember that in the middle of this. But because also during this time, and this is going to sound weird to you guys, but during that first year, at some point, there was a car lot up the street. My husband had bought a Volvo, an old red Volvo. One had a good body. He actually bought two. One had a good body and one had a good engine. And he took the engine because I think my brother had a cherry picker. My brother had everything. Had a cherry picker in his garage and let him use it to pull the engine out and put it in the other one. So he had this Volvo with spare parts, but he had a decent body and a decent engine now. Well, he had done that during the first year that we were here, and so he was selling the parts to that Volvo. So he would drive that Volvo to work, and I drove the car with no insurance. But here's the thing. During that time, when he was selling the parts for the Volvo, some guy answered the ad, and the guy who answered the ad worked at a place in a town that was about 45 minutes away. And so he's like, hey, I see that you're a machinist. We're hiring here. Maybe you should apply. So he applies and he gets a job. And when I say he gets a job, I mean it's a substantial raise. No longer doing two jobs and me doing one. It's a substantial raise. Well, he had gotten that job 2 weeks before my brother died. 13 days, actually, before my brother died. So when my brother died, there was a part of us that was wanting to celebrate the fact that he had gotten this job, but we couldn't because we were grieving the fact that my brother had died. And so while we're scrambling to sort of do all this, my family comes up. My sister Pauline comes up, my mom comes up, my sister Lorraine comes up, my sister Judy come up, and my sister's two kids all come up. And they're staying with us. And it's not a good scene, you guys. It's not a good scene. Yeah, it's not a good scene. I'm questioning right now in my mind that tilt is whether there's some stuff I should share or not. But let me tell you, it wasn't a good scene. And my husband at the time came to me and said, hey, this thing happened. And something that was familiar in the past was trying to happen. And he was like someone took a shower and was standing there in a towel in front of him. And he was like having none of it and went outside. And it was just all weird stuff. And then my little sister wouldn't get up with her kids. And I was getting up all night with her kids. And my mom was just a fragile, because remember, she had emphysema, was just super frail, and it was not a good scene. It was not a good situation. And then, after the funeral, we go to my brother's for, I guess you would call it a wake, which we did with every funeral. And my uncle, my child molesting uncle, is there. So I'm a paranoid freak about making sure that my kids are never out of my sight. I'm like, you stay with me. And it was just bad. My brother and my nephew get into a fight because the way that my brother spoke to me, my nephew don't talk to her like that. It was just, there was a lot of weird, because I adore my nephew. He was so special to us. He was so special. Special kid. I loved him so much. And he was very protective over us. And so, he wasn't tolerating people disrespecting me and stuff. But I remember, my husband at the time, I had curled my hair or something, and he was, making fun of the way my hair was curled. And my brother, who ended up picking on me later, actually said, well, I like the way her hair looks. Her hair looks nice, And, he just had a way of just making me feel constantly less than. It was not good. And when we were at the funeral, or at the wake, I remember at one point, because my brother-in-law's there, And they got into the discussion about everybody who had dated him. And I said, I never did. And they're like, what? And I like looked at him and I said, you tell the truth right now. And he's like, no, never, nothing, never. And I said, never, nothing, ever. You know, I'm willing to own my crap, but I do not like being falsely accused of stuff because it just makes me nuts. Like, it's not true, so therefore, whatever. But during this whole thing, and I know I'm sort of going all over the place, I literally, you guys, start to lose my mind. Like, it was the first time that I realized that I'm really broken inside. Like, my sister at the time, she had cut my hair in the midst of this, and she like chopped my hair off. And I don't know why I let her chop my hair off, because I like long hair, and my hair used to be really short when I was in Arizona, but I'd let it grow out since I had left, and I've not had it short since. I had it short in Arizona because it was hot, but I like long hair. My hair is really long, and I'm good with it. If other people who look fantastic in short hair, awesome. I like long hair on me. But anyway, I remember just walking around and that twisting my hands up in my shirt constantly. Just constantly having my hands twisted up in my shirt. And I was just always like, ugh. Well, my mom decided to stay up here, and she was at my brother's house. And I remember, like, I had gone to the mall. I don't know if it was my safety place or what, to go shopping or something. And when I did, at some point in the mall, my brain checked out, and the mall that I had worked at, I had no idea where I parked. I didn't know how to get out of the mall. Like, my mind just stopped. And so I call my mom at my brother's, and I'm hysterically crying. And she's like, what's the matter with you? And like, just wasn't understanding that I'm like, I don't know where I parked my car. I don't know where I parked my car. And like, nobody understood what was happening to me, but I was actually coming unraveled. Eventually I figured out on my own how to get to the car. Well, when I was driving home, I stopped at the gas station to get milk or something. And when I got in the car, instead of putting it, when I had parked, instead of parking like where you have two stalls facing each other, I had pulled through. So I was like this. Well, instead of putting it in drive to leave the stall, I put it in reverse and backed into a car. And I remember like calling my husband at the time to tell him, and he was screaming at me and just telling me how stupid I was. And like, it was just feeding more of that losing my freaking mind, you guys. Like, I was like, literally, I could not think straight. Like, and I remember my friend who had gone on Prozac, she started telling me about Prozac, and I like, because I was losing my mind. Like, seriously, I was. So I went to a doctor, and he put me on Prozac, and I started taking Prozac. And now initially, like, I'm way down here, okay, initially. But what happened with this medicine is like, it slowly started lifting me up till I got normal, but it didn't stop there. It got me past normal to a place of euphoria. So things that I should feel bad about, I wasn't feeling bad about. I wasn't feeling anything bad. Like, I never felt guilt or anything. I didn't feel anything. I just sort of did what I wanted and could care less. And like, it became all about me. And, you know, I started tanning, got myself tan, buying myself all kinds of clothes, dyed my hair blonde. And like, I just changed into a different person after my brother died. Like, because I was feeling so much shame and guilt about his death, because I felt like God had given me the opportunity to say goodbye to him, and I didn't take it. I said, no, I'll talk to him later. Tell him I love him. I'll talk to him later. And he was shot 3 hours later, and he died 24 hours after that and never regained consciousness. And I felt like I had missed my opportunity to say goodbye to my brother. And so, like, like I said, everything in my brain was just becoming unraveled. So I needed this medication, you know, to get better, because I could tell, like, I was at a place of suicide. Like, my bipolar is the first time I can honestly see, like, I had already struggled really bad with my period, like mood swings with my period and cramping and horrible pain with my period, just horrible, because endometriosis ran in our family, and like, but this was different. This was, I was in clinical, I was cycling bad, and I was in clinical depression, and it was terrible. But that medication made me feel great, and I didn't want to do anything except have fun. Have fun, have fun, have fun. And that's when it became, like, all about me. And it was not good, you guys. It was not good. And in the process of this, I started having sort of flashbacks. Like, when I would get in the car with my kids, I would have flashbacks of my mom driving drunk, or flashbacks of her, what things she had done to me. And I could feel that the resentment and bitterness had been building up on top of, by the time she got here when my brother died, it was already up to here. Like, I had been away from her over a year, and going on a year and a half, and I just wanted nothing to do with her at this point. Like, I just wanted her out of my life, because all of the stuff that she had done to us was bubbling up on the surface now. It was all coming to the surface. This is before my brother died. But when my brother died, during the time from when my brother died to the time that I got on Prozac, there was months that went in between there. During those months, I felt such rage and anger toward her. It was not good. And I will tell you where it culminated. I remember, because by this time my kids are in school and stuff like that. And I remember her coming over, and her and my sister were like screaming at each other. And I was on the phone with one of my kids' teachers, because my girls were 5 at this time, because a year had passed. But during that year of when we first moved back here is when all of those feelings started bubbling up about my mom, and the resentment and anger, and, starting to get filled with frustration and rage. And so when my brother died a year after we got here, like, it was just, everything was raw. And so I was on the phone with my kid's teacher, and they walk in, and they're like yelling at each other while I'm on the phone. And I said, "Can you hold on?" And I was like, and when I got done talking, I said, "Get out." I said, "If you're going to come in my house yelling, you can get the hell out. Get out." Like, I told him, "Leave, get out. I'm not putting up with that." Like, I was just done. I had taken, so much abuse. I wasn't going to take it. And they leave. They leave and go back to my mom's apartment. And because she had gotten an apartment when my brother, after my brother's death, she didn't go back to Arizona immediately. And I remember it was getting close to around Christmas time. So they had been here a few months. And I go to her house. And at this point, my aunt, my child molesting uncle, his aunt, or his wife, now ex-wife, I think, was around in these apartments where my mom was living, or maybe she was staying with her or something. I don't know. Somehow or another, she came into play at this point. But I went over to my mom's one day, and it was close to Christmas time, and I'm sitting there, and I see some pictures, so I like pick up the pictures, and I start going through the pictures, just thinking, oh, I'm looking at old pictures. And then I see the picture. It's a picture of Junior holding my kids. Remember that time I said that I asked my mom to watch my kids because I needed some sleep? And I told her specifically, do not let Junior around my kids. He was holding my kids. Talk about batshit crazy. And again, this is before I started the Prozac. Talk about batshit crazy. So at this point, we have moved back. We spent a year, trying to make our marriage work, trying to make our family work, trying to be normal, whatever. My kids start school. My husband gets, a good job 2 weeks later, 13 days later, my brother is murdered. All kinds of, you know, that year that before my brother's murdered, all that stuff starts bubbling up to the surface. Now it's a few months in past my brother's death, and I find out that my mom had let Junior see my kids. I lost my flippin' mind. I was like screaming as loud as I could. What the have you done? And I was like, I told you. And I mean, you guys, I'm like, it's over. And I never, all through the years, I'd never told my mom I hated her. My little sister told my mom she hated her all the time. Hated her all. And I'm like, I said it that day, I hate you. I fucking hate you. And I said, we're done. It's over. I don't ever want to see you again. And I left. And that, for me, in my mind, that was it. Like, she had crossed the line that I was unwilling to forgive, you guys. Unwilling. And that, like, made it worse. 100 times worse. That, in combined with my brother dying, is why I had to go on medication. Because, like, I felt the shame and guilt of endangering my children because I needed a nap, because I needed sleep, and I had nobody else there because their dad was on the road in the semi. And the complexities of family and stuff is really hard. But when you have like horrendous abuse and addiction all through it, it's hard enough to be a normal family, you know, and not have all that crap. But to have all that crap and drama and infighting and incest and, you know, just all of it, it just bubbled out. And I, like, you guys, it was not good. That's when I was like shopping like crazy. I started getting addicted to shopping, and, you know, I got a tan and got my hair blonde. And I don't know if I was trying not to be the person that I was when I got abused. I don't know. But I completely changed. I went on the medication. You know, I started, like, my husband at the time and stuff, we fought. And, like, you know, I just worked at the movie theater. And then at this point, I was working at Kohl's. But I just became, like, just about me. Like, I was all about me. It was about me. Hi, you guys. Sorry about the interruption, but I realized something. As I was editing the video, I realized, like, we were pushing into a really long time. So I'm going to stop here. But part 2 is actually already done. I just have to edit it because this video was so long that I decided to interrupt here because I'm about to talk about where we change homes. So you'll watch this video. I'm going to post this. This will be, it's going to be kind of a part 1, part 2, because they overlap with each other, but I separated them because of the length of time. So with that being said, this is chapter 13, and 14 should follow immediately, or 13B. Haven't decided yet. With that being said, Melinda out.